Hi there, and welcome to the Working Differently in Extension podcast. I'm Bob Birch. Great to have you along for today's program as we're going to be talking about, I think, some important issues for the country and for Extension as well. Our guest today is Roberto Gallardo. Roberto is an associate extension professor at Mississippi State University Center for Technology Outreach, and he's also the leader of the Intelligent Community Institute at Mississippi State University Extension. Roberto, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Roberto, you recently gave a talk at TEDx Jackson about the rural digital divide. Is giving a TED talk as hard as everybody says it is? Everybody who's given one, anyway.
Yeah, it is a different thing for sure. Giving presentations and everything makes your life kind of interesting, but the TEDx is another thing because that timer in front of you will really put some pressure. But it was fun. It was fun.
So let's talk a little bit about this idea of the rural digital divide. The digital era, some authors and thinkers told us, this is going to make the world flat. And sort of even the playing field for a lot of people. So why do we still have a digital divide?
Well, it's an interesting and complicated situation. The digital divide consists of two main components. One is access, tightly related to affordability, and the other one is adoption. So access is, not having access to the technology or not having access to adequate speeds, because many times regions are connected, but their speeds are just not adequate. And then affordability is another part of it. People may have access to it, but it may be expensive. And then on the other hand, you've got adoption. Do you see it relevant? Is it going to impact your life? Are you willing to pay 10, 15, 20, $25 more for something that you may not see as needed or as important? So those two dynamics are really what give birth to the digital divide today in the 21st century. And it is a very, very serious issue because those on the wrong side of the divide that either don't have access or can't afford it or don't know how to use it or find it relevant are being left further and further behind.
So let's talk about the access part of it. I mean, it seems like for, quite a while now, at least, within the government and among companies and nonprofits, we've heard about sort of building out broadband. Is there let me ask, are we making strides in building out broadband out to rural areas? And where we're not making those strides, are there underlying reasons why not?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not rocket science. It is tied to population density. The ROI of the carriers is there. I mean, that's what's driving them. And so, yes, there's been excellent advancements in wiring the most populated areas, including county seats in rural communities or rural counties. However, we still have about 60% or so of people as of 2014, so that may have changed, but of people in rural communities that do not live in the county seat, that still do not have access to that 25.3, which is currently the definition of broadband. And so that's very, very not good in a way because they're being left behind. But then the carrier, they're like, look, it's just not economically feasible to build it out there. So it's this interesting dynamic where it's got to have to be a public-private partnership that's going to have to bring it out there. And I know technology is improving. In the future, we may have wireless technology that can address that. But what people don't realize is any wireless technology has to be eventually wired, or grounded. So, and trees and topography and rivers and lakes, those affect wireless. So people, when I talk to them, they tell me, oh, why don't they do wireless? And now mobile wireless, we're speaking about fixed broadband, but mobile, we all see the commercials that, most of the US is covered with 3G or 4G technology. The problem with mobile, though, is the limited data plans. I mean, it's better than nothing for sure, but if you pierce that ceiling, um, it becomes very, very expensive. So.
You've mentioned in your talk that you think this digital divide is really just one of the biggest threats to economic progress, and you may have touched on that a little bit already. But can you go deeper into like why do you think that is? Why is it so important that we get rural areas connected?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, because it's just the digital economy, the knowledge economy. It's moving that way, and if you're not if you do not have access to that pipe, you're going to be out of that world, that virtual world, that huge market. A little bit over less than half of the world population is online, so a little bit more than half are offline. So that tells you it's going to continue to grow. But if you don't have that connectivity, then you're being left out. I've seen multiple times in rural communities how a local business be able to compete with other businesses that back in the industrial age would have been impossible because you don't have that physical density, that market density. But in this digital age, it opens up the door for that. So not only on the side of the business but also on the side of the residents. If you don't have access to skills, to learning new skills, you don't have access to applying for jobs. I've seen people turn in their physical resume to the library or job center here, and that 100% of the Fortune 500 companies only accept applications online, for example. So that's why it's a tremendous threat, because you don't have access to the market, you don't have access to funding, crowdfunding and all those options, and you don't have on the resident side, you don't have access to jobs and education. So it is very. It's like back in the day, if you would have built a great industrial site but no roads, right, or no rail to it. I mean, it's exactly the same analogy.
So let's talk a little bit about the adoption question. You mentioned that as part of the formula there. Why do you think that adoption is a problem in rural areas?
Well, rural areas tend to be older, poorer, less educated, and those are factors associated with lagging in technology adoption. In this case, broadband. So that's a big hurdle that we've got to overcome, and that places rural communities by default on the line of being on the wrong side of the divide. Adoption is a more complex situation because you've got to have a motivation, you've got to have relevance to be able to adopt a technology. So it's kind of a different animal per se. A policy at the federal level has focused increasingly on the access side over the years, as you mentioned, and now it's slowly shifting back into realizing, well, okay, now we've got that out there. We've got to make sure people not only use it or adopt it, but use it as creative and as diverse as possible. That's ultimately the objective of any technology adoption, is to have diverse uses for it and creative uses for it.
So, are there particular stories? I mean, you've been out in rural communities in Mississippi. Are there particular experiences that you've had that maybe underscore that a little bit? I'm just, I'm curious about. I don't want to stereotype or generalize, but the mindset, that might be present. That might be holding communities back.
Yeah, again, rural communities are a little bit more conservative. They're typically lagging on adoption of technology. They don't they prefer to see how it plays out and then they make a move. And I'm not generalizing either, but that's what I've seen in the majority of communities. There are some that are they see it, they get it, and they're after it. So it's really a play of, you've got older elected officials that don't see it as a necessity, as going, well, isn't it for entertainment only? You've got a younger crowd that are pushing for that. So you've got this clash, this generational clash, and that I've seen in rural communities play out. Other times they're just not comfortable using the technology, and for valid reasons. I mean, we see this hacking here and this hacking there, privacy and security, and so people go, you know what, I want nothing to do with that, and it's a valid concern. I mean, you can't blame them, but that's where education and awareness play a huge role. And I think that's where extension can play a significant role in this microcosmos of the digital divide.
So, what are some of the things that that you and the people that you work with have been, and Mississippi State University Extension has been doing to address those concerns in the digital divide?
Well, I have a great group of colleagues here at the Center for Technology Outreach that are in and day out, traveling, crisscrossing the state like I am, teaching anything from computer basics all the way to cloud applications to job applications, job searching. I mean, it's just there's a lot of things that need to be covered. Typically the community that reaches out to us through the extension agent, so you can start to see why extension can play or is playing an important role. The extension agent identifies the needs, in this case digital literacy topic needs, and so they relay it to us, and then we go in there and we teach, and we have workshops, and we have presentations, and anything, because again, relevance and adoption, research shows that if you're exposed to the good side and the correct side of using the technology, you're more likely to adopt. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do when we go out there and offer digital literacy workshops.
So, this is something. I guess I don't know the whole cooperative extension map and how many services are doing this, but I've heard this is something that extension was active in, sort of in the first computer age, as we started to see personal computers, proliferate across the country. Actually going out and doing computer training. I know in my state, in North Dakota, and the fact that I just haven't heard a lot, I don't know that national extension's playing the same role that you're talking about of actually going out and doing training. So that's a big, huge setup to kind of ask, what led to Mississippi State University Extension actually playing that role, where maybe some systems decided, there's other people doing that, and we need to focus on, more traditional extension roles in community building.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I have extension colleagues, Oklahoma, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Washington State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that are just great. They have great programs. And I think everybody got on board with that stimulus funding back in 2009. That's what really accelerated everything. And I borrow a lot of materials from my colleagues. So I don't want to say that Mississippi is the only one doing this. We're just part of a team. And so back in the day, about 5 or 6 years ago, everybody jumped on this, including private companies, right, that wanted to offer digital literacy. And so there was this kind of tension between extension, which is tax funded, and then you have a private sector going, okay, we're doing the same thing here. The good thing is we had plenty to go around for everybody, right? And so that's been around. There's great programs out there that are either focused on small businesses, or either focus on underserved communities or low income communities or government. So you've got bits and pieces here. What I think we're doing different here in Mississippi is that we borrowed, or we're using, the intelligent community concept, which really is an umbrella that ties everything together. So otherwise, you may be looking at a specific tree and you fail to see the forest. And that's critical when you're dealing with rural communities, because you've got to get them to see the forest, because if they only see a couple of trees down the line, they may not be willing to be part of it. But yet if they can see the forest, then that in my case changes the whole dynamic. So that's what we realize here in Mississippi is, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing that, but we need something above all that kind of can tie everything together. And there's multiple models out there. I'm not saying the intelligent community concept is the only one, but that's the one that we're using. And we found that it's resonating. I mean, it is conveying the message. It helps frame the discussion in such a way that rural communities go, aha, okay, now I see. Let's go on. Let's continue.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the intelligent community framework, and what how's it made up to kind of tie all those things together?
Yeah, the intelligent community concept, intelligent community is defined as one that either through crisis or foresight has taken proactive steps to be prosperous in this digital age. It was coined by the Intelligent Community Forum, which is a worldwide think tank, and so Mississippi State Extension submitted a proposal to them to be designated an Intelligent Community Institute. So it consists of 6 indicators. One of them is broadband connectivity. The other one is innovation. The other one is knowledge workforce. The other one is sustainability. The fifth one is advocacy, and then the sixth one is digital equality or digital equality. And so the 4 of the indicators are your traditional community economic development indicators. Innovation, yeah, we know that. Knowledge workforce, we know that. Advocacy, we know that. Sustainability, yes, it's important. But then they added those 2 other ones, broadband connectivity and digital equality and digital inclusion. So those 2, when taken together, all 6 provide a different lens on which you can see your community. And so if you use those indicators kind of as a roadmap, and then you hit everything, you hit education, you hit jobs, you hit telehealth, you hit civic engagement, you hit sustainability, you hit precision ag, I mean, you just hit everything. So it provides a great umbrella concept under which you can kind of move and act.
As you kind of adopted this approach and the intelligent community approach and this idea of actually providing digital literacy training, um, did you did you have to address that from a workforce standpoint from extension? I guess some of our systems, our state systems, maybe our agents aren't the most technologically savvy people in the community.
Oh, yes, definitely. We have here what we call the Tech Academy, which is a professional development course. We are going to do the 4th year this fall, I believe, or the 3rd. I can't remember. But yes, definitely. I mean, you can't ask extension agents to go out there and convey that message if they themselves don't have the capability, or they don't understand, or they've been just in their own world for many, many years. And so you've got to honestly or obviously look within as well. And so, yes, we offer this professional development where we teach extension agents on technology. And then when it's my turn to teach, I always say, look, this is just one of the pieces of the puzzle that you're playing. And so it's important to make sure that those that are going to be helping you in the trenches kind of have a basic understanding. We're not expecting anybody to be an expert, but to have a basic understanding to kind of relate, because they are those boots on the ground. They are the ones that are exposed and in the front, at the front. And so you've got to make sure they understand the basics of the implications at least, and they are comfortable enough at some level that then they can start talking. And then when it reaches a point, then the statewide folks, then we can come in.
So some of what we've been talking about is sort of the digital literacy stuff that technology basics and things like that. But I know I read some of the things that you're doing in the Center for Technology Outreach are things like taking 3D printers out to communities. Can you talk about the importance of, if there is a distinction or importance between sort of the basics, but also sort of the innovative, the cutting edge kind of technologies, and how you balance that?
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously there is a difference between the basics and the more innovative applications, but you cannot get anywhere if you don't have the basics first. The basics are that platform, or that launching pad, and so you've got to tackle the basics first. And I've seen it time and time again. Don't overwhelm them with knowledge. Agents or residents or communities, just introduce them to specific topics, and then whatever resonates with them will resonate, and then they will go on their own and seek the depth they feel is necessary. So with the 3D printers, printers. The agent that helped me place it in the public library, I didn't expect her to be an expert on 3D printers, but she understood. She knew that that was something that needed to be introduced into the community in general, specifically specific clientele that more than likely may not have been exposed to the technology until later on. So that is why we placed it in a public library, and it's been a tremendous success, because kids can see when things are being printed and they get excited, and you never know what seeds you're planting. I mean, you never know what idea is going to come out of that exposure down the road. So it's really fulfilling, and it's really gratifying.
One of the things that you mentioned in your TED Talk is this idea of virtual collaboration, and I'd like to hear you talk about that, because I think sometimes we might get in the mindset that the idea of providing this access or getting a community connected is really for them to push out products, but I think the idea of virtual collaboration implies there's more to it than that.
Oh yeah, I mean the nature of innovation is changing in the digital age. I mean, and that really is what helps level the playing field, I think. The connectivity is the entrance to it, but I think that innovation is changing big time. As I mentioned, back in the day, you had a density of minds and resources, which used to be urban areas and big companies. But now with virtual collaboration or virtual density, that physical density is not a requirement. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're seeing the trends towards that. So based on that, you've got to make sure the rural community understands that in reality, they don't have to be in New York or Silicon Valley or elsewhere to innovate. I mean, and back in the day, like way before the industrial age, rural communities were very innovative. I mean, you couldn't wait and for help to come. And that essence is still there. It's still there, but now we can give it a big shot or boost with connectivity, and now you're going to be part of a worldwide network. And so innovation is that. Innovation is taking an idea, and with your unique background and needs and challenges, you can find a different use for that idea. That's innovation, and so it builds up. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's very rare that it's just one single person. So that virtual density, that virtual collaboration, is really where you start to see the potential of going, you know what, I don't have to reinvent the wheel on my own, and so I can collaborate. So that's very important.
So what are some of the success stories that you've had so far? Are there communities that are really coming along through this process that you've been leading in at Mississippi State University Extension?
Yes, and I've got low-hanging outputs that I can boast and share and brag about, but in reality, community development takes a long time, and so you've got to be patient. I tell my administrators, I tell my stakeholders, we are planting seeds. Okay, so bear with me. This will not happen overnight. But when you start to see those outputs, those immediate outputs moving in the right direction, then I get excited, because I don't know, 5, 10 years down the road, we may look back and say, well, it all started back then. And as you know, community development, I mean, it's just a lot of noise everywhere. You cannot actually say, oh, because I did that, that's what happened. But I mean, it's glad to be part of the equation. And so the low hanging fruit, immediate outputs that we've seen is, first and foremost, the mindset. You've got to have a change in the mindset. And that I've seen with multiple communities here in Mississippi that tell me, you know what, Roberto, thank you for working with us. We're here with you. I get it. My board of aldermen may not, but let's take it piece by piece. And so that's what we're doing. We reached about 1,500 people in Mississippi through workshops, through meetings. We've placed a 3D printer. We got a Wi-Fi hotspot in a volunteer fire department in a town of 300 people. And we do the digital literacy that we had already been doing. We have some community plans and action steps already in implementation. So those to me are the success stories. But let me share with you a story that really to me is more fulfilling than any of all the other stuff. I was in a workshop teaching digital literacy, and I was there when an 80-year-old person sent his first email. And that was just fascinating to see, because you can see how their mind just goes, oh my God. And that is really, you never know what's going to, end of that. You don't know, but just being part of that at the beginning is just very gratifying. So those are kind of the success stories. And in my case, a success story is really also showing that extension is there. That extension is important and continues to be important. I mean, we just turned 100 years, right? And so we're still here and we're doing great things. And people realize, they're like, hey, that's great. And of course, I've had other experiences where I come to talk about the digital age, and then somebody pulls me aside and says, hey, you're from Extension? Yes, I am. Hey, you know what? My garden is dying. Can you come help me after this? And so that's totally okay. And we're not turning our back to that. At least I am not. But it's important for them to see that extension is also reaching out into other areas.
For an extension professional who might be listening to this right now and thinking, I kind of get it. What can I do in my community? Are there places that you can point them to learn more and sort of figure out how to get started making some headway in this area?
Sure. Even though we're based in Mississippi, the concept, the outreach process is just a secondhand nature to extension agents. So they can contact me and I can point them in the right direction. I'll be glad to share the checklist that we have that we do with communities. I'll be glad to share the PowerPoint I have with a script that they can go out there and they need to go to ici.msucares.com and they can contact me. And I'll be happy to, that turf of, oh no, I came up with that idea, it's mine. Totally not applicable. They can definitely, as more people participate, the more feedback I get, and so that's better for everybody. So they can contact me. I'll be happy to point them in the right direction. If I know a colleague in their state, I can connect them both, and then they can move on from there. But again, it's all about just kind of basically understanding what the implications are, and that's critical. That's critical.
And you have a book available.
Yes, in
That
fact,
I'd love you to share the information
sure.
about that if you could.
The paperback version just came out yesterday. It's called Responsive Countryside, and it's really just it's the TEDx talk in more detail. But don't tell people that, because then they're going to go watch the TEDx talk and they're not going to read the book. But I talk about what the digital age is, what broadband is. It's really for rural stakeholders and leaders. I wrote it that thinking of them of okay, you've got me started. Where can I learn more about this? And so this book defines the digital age, defines the intelligent community concept, defines broadband. Shows a couple of rural trends of where rural communities are heading, or where the trends that are taking place. I talk about chapter 3 is perhaps the most important one, because I talk about the applications today that are transforming the landscape that rural communities need to be aware of, and they may be aware of a couple, but maybe they don't see the big picture, how they fit. And then there's a chapter there of all the negatives. Of course, you've got to acknowledge that not everything is perfect. But the last chapter is where I call the responsive countryside, is the role extension can play in helping communities making this transition. It's not long. I know that if it's long, nobody's going to read it. So yeah. And I'll send you the link for the Kindle version. We're setting up the ability now to be able to ship and sell the paperback version. And now I'm not profiting at all from this. I'm not going to get a cent from what is sold. The revenue from it will go back to the institute to continue buying iPads and 3D printers and paying and buying time of colleagues here in Mississippi or elsewhere to continue working on this important objective.
The book is Responsive Countryside, and we'll share that link in the show notes. Dr. Roberto Gallardo, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Well, no, thank you for allowing me to participate here and just continue talking. It's important. Conveying the message is the key thing. What I believe strongly is that without awareness and education, nothing can be understood, and much less planned for and implemented. So really, don't try get ahead. Get the cart ahead of the horse. You've got to start at the basic level. And so that's what we're doing. But thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Roberto Gallardo is Associate Extension Professor with the Mississippi State University Extension Center for Technology Outreach. He also leads the Mississippi State University Extension Intelligent Community Institute. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. As always, hit us up on Twitter. It's at WDNEXT. You can find more podcasts on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/working differently, and the show notes will be available at bobbirch.com. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.